With us today, my good buddy Dan. And Dan, let me ask you, how did you get tied up in this whole IT space? And what are you guys up to?
Hey Josh, thanks for having me on the podcast. It's an interesting story because I came from a systems development background, and somehow I found myself at a Big Four accounting firm doing what they called technology risk, 20 something years ago. And it wasn't cybersecurity at the time. Now it's what we know as cybersecurity. So I really fell into this, and I saw an opportunity early on, mid 2000s, where it felt like there was really momentum moving in the direction of cyber, which of course ties into what MSPs are doing today as well. And at that point, I set out to found a startup, and 17, 18 years later, here we are.
Yeah, hell yeah. Now, I know you a long time and you always say words that I don't fucking understand. What was that word you said? What were you doing at the Big Four? Not technology risk, but development of some kind. What'd you say?
I I was doing initially, I worked for an application developer, a systems integrator coming out of college.
Okay,
And
and
it
what
just
did
gave me
that
a stepping stone into what became cyber.
Okay, okay. So were you ever turning wrenches, working on networks, doing that kind of traditional MSP work?
Ironically, never, never,
Yeah.
never have. But what's interesting is that even having never done that and having a business that revolves around the security architecture and the network architecture of our client base,
Mhm.
we hire a ton of sysadmins, right? Because
Yeah.
they understand network security, they understand how things operate in the business, and that's foundational from an understanding of risk and cybersecurity.
Okay, understood. So tell me a little bit about the business today. What would be the simplest way? Like explain, you have the young daughter, I believe. Explain to me the way you explained to her what it is the fuck you guys do.
Sure. You asked me before we got on
Yeah.
if I would describe us as an MSP, and I said no.
Mhm.
And I characterize that because we are the independent assessor. So we're the guys that come in and we essentially say, client, you have payment card data and the credit card brands require you to have a security assessment by a PCI QSA, or your clients or company organizations require you to have a SOC report. These are terms that I think the MSP community is likely familiar with, or HIPAA or high trust or things like that. So we're the guys that come in and actually look at the environment and assess whether or not that environment whether or not there have been security measures implemented that meet the requirements of the security standards. And as I mentioned, the flip side of this is that the MSP world, we're relying on them in many and in increasing number of cases in the market to advise those clients, to help prepare them, to ensure that they have those provisions in place.
Right.
And then, of course, when we find things, to take action and help to remediate those items.
Okay, you guys will actually remediate some of the items you find, or you're looking
We
to the
will
MSP
not.
for
That's what we
yeah,
look to the MSPs for. Like, we can't audit the work we do, so it's
right.
really important that our clients either have the expertise on staff and or a partner. And more often than not, it is a partner, an MSP or an MSP relationship that helps with these types of things.
Understood. Okay, that makes so much sense to me. So you guys, all right. So I got so many questions. So we go, who hires you? Is it typically a small to medium business? Is it a large enterprise level business? Who is your typical client in here?
So our typical clients are, I would say, I'm going to talk in terms of seats. I think that's the language
Yeah.
of the MSPs. um, 50 to a few thousand.
Okay.
We aren't involved in the 10,000 plus seats organizations at the level that
Right.
we are in the mid market and lower market. And we have plenty of smaller clients as well, smaller than 50 seats, but really their sophistication level, complexity, ability to manage security, be compliant, it's reduced at that point. So we're not as involved.
Okay, understood. So, and the reason I ask that is, we work with, hundreds of MSPs and they're typically working with clients that are, sub 100 seats, oftentimes sub 50 seats. And the stories we hear from them when they're trying to bolt on or bolster the security posture for their clients are really frustrating conversations. They just, the client maybe doesn't quite understand their risk. They maybe don't care sometimes. And if nothing else, they don't feel like they can afford it. You are not working with that type of client. You're working with a client who's already accepted that, hey, there's risk and there's a cost to mitigating that risk. Is that a fair way of putting it?
I would, yes, I would agree with that. And you hit all the nails on the head, right? And I know the MSPs feel the same kind of pain. We'd love to work with those smaller clients. In fact, they're a great big pipeline for becoming bigger clients for us. But a lot of times they don't have the budget. They don't have the sophistication. I mean, that's a big part of it too. A lot of founder-led organizations that don't really have, technology sophistication. They don't value risk because they've got too many other problems to worry about it at that stage, right?
Right.
And there's some segmentation in terms of vertical as well. I mean, I think that those MSPs that are SaaS startups or other technology centric businesses probably get better response.
Mhm.
But when you get into those non-tech centric business, there's just a lack of sophistication and understanding and willingness to pay and
Yeah.
um, invest in that piece of the business.
I got so many like kind of scenarios to run by you, but I'll kind of do this one here. So I've got a couple few clients that serve dental, and one of them has clients up and down from Michigan all the way down to Florida. Has about 800 dentists he works with. Just awesome company. Really, they just primarily serve dental, and he tells me those guys have zero concern. They do not give two shits about security. They barely care about good network, not to throw Dennis under the bus, but that's just the general theme. What is it when they're kind of healthcare adjacent? You would think there's some regulation that is really demanding it, but as a whole, they're just kind of saying, "Don't care, don't no, don't bother us with that." Why does that incongruency exist, or what have you seen that same incongruency?
So it's interesting that you picked dentist because the one industry that we see that the most in, I would just broadly characterize it as healthcare. It's not just
Yeah.
dentists, it's doctors, doctor's office, dentists, anybody in that space, especially when they're, let's call it patient serving.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not talking about the big healthcare systems and things like that, but those individual practitioners or small multi-location practices. And I liken it to this idea that there's no teeth in the HIPAA standard, which is
Mm.
sometimes you rely on a standard or a governing body to drive quote unquote security, right? It's really
Right.
compliance driven, right? But other times it's event driven. Somebody has a huge breach and all of a sudden people become aware that this is a big problem, right? And then the
Right.
industry sort of adopts better security practices. I don't think we've seen any teeth from a compliance standpoint in terms of how the government has enforced things in healthcare.
Right.
And frankly, I don't know that anybody's experienced the pain at the practitioner level where they're willing to look at these things. I mean, that's my feeling. And I know when I
Yeah.
walk into my own dentist office or doctor, I shouldn't throw my personal doctors and dentists under the bus. I think they're great practitioners, but it's horrors. I'm like, I can't believe you're doing that. Like, you're
Right.
really going to do that? And you see it. There's a password taped up on a monitor in front of you, and you're like, oh my gosh.
Right.
You know?
Wow. Okay, so it's really event driven or kind of standard driven. And a dentist, I kind of try to break it down in my head a little bit. Like, okay, what's the worst thing that's going to happen to that dental clinic if they get breached? It's like, well, same impact as any other small business, but there's not really this additional. It's like, oh, great, everyone can see my client's X-rays. Who cares? Like
Right.
I can see
Right.
lots of logic in their brains of saying we just don't care. Um, Now the other scenario is I do have this newer client, really awesome company down in Ohio, and they kind of on the outside looking in, they look like a traditional MSP, but so much of our conversations are around they serve a lot of local government. And in Ohio, there's something I just was talking to, so I remember House Bill 96. And whatever that means, they're like, we have to be so prepared for this because all of our clients are about to get, jail time or big fines or loss of accreditation as a government entity if they don't comply. So they're kind of like gearing up, like, how do we turn this opportunity into something great? Um, but in my mind, I kind of think, well, that sounds great. I haven't seen great teeth, to use your phrase, behind enforcement. Can you shed some light on what you've seen when the government's kind of state or local kind of say this is what's happening and we mean it this time? Like
Sure,
what's in your
sure.
experience or observation?
Yeah, I don't know House Bill 96, but I can tell you a couple of trends that are happening that probably have nexus with what you're referring to here. One is called StateRAMP.
State
Uh,
ramp.
and you may have heard that there's this other thing called FedRAMP, and essentially, I am not an expert on any of these standards. To be clear, I'm an expert, maybe an expert in the industry, but not in the specific standards. FedRAMP's really designed so that the government entities that contract things out that have sort of security risk nexus, if you will,
Mhm.
they have to work with a FedRAMP certified. I don't know if the certification is the right word, but a FedRAMP certified body, and there are different levels of certification, right? CMMC is another thing that's happening at a much broader government level, and it's the same kind of thing. If you build an aircraft part, even if you're painting a little part for the government, and that government has given you a government contract, you have to maintain a certain level of security compliance, right? So some of this is starting at the federal level, and it's trickling down to the state level.
Mhm.
State ramp is something that we're starting to see become prolific, and effectively a lot of the states are adopting their own federal government like standards around security for state and local entities that want to sub out to independent commercial organizations pieces of their business or subcontract work or things like that. And it just makes sure that, hey, if there is information in the public domain that those public entities are accountable for, we're passing that accountability along anytime we hand that data over, anytime we work with somebody that puts their hands on it, and it ensures a consistent level of accountability, security, and compliance over what we do in the public domain. So that's likely what's happening. I don't know
Yeah,
that bill specifically, but
right.
it's pushing a lot of changes because most of like MSPs, for example, probably aren't accustomed to operating that environment with state and local government. And all of a sudden, but I will say it will create opportunity for the MSPs. That's what's great about it. I mean,
Yeah,
it's great from a business opportunity standpoint.
right.
So, risk and opportunity are often one and the same. And I think that's what we have here. There's some risk of we don't know how to deal with this, and it's going to be more fees. We could lose some clients. And the opportunity is that, hey, if you take the bull by the horns, and invest in this, somebody's going to get that work, right? And
Right.
these entities will have to be compliant, and showing your clients, your customers, that you're a leader in that space and can provide them the guidance and come up with cost-effective strategies to help them build their own programs out and maintain them. To me, it's a big business opportunity for the MSP space, and it's a good opportunity for us as the independent assessors as well.
Yeah, hell yeah. Okay. So let me ask you, do you know the name Wes Spencer?
It sounds familiar, but I can't say that I could place
Okay.
it.
He's in the MSP space. He's kind of a guy that leads a lot of cybersecurity conversations. He's a really knowledgeable guy. And I don't want to put words in his mouth, but one of the things I kind of thought I took away from some of the conversations I've heard him have is we want to avoid the government having to regulate cybersecurity. We want to just act right now so that they don't have to come in and, put a lot of rules on small business. Um,
Yeah.
does that sound like a familiar refrain? Have you heard things like that before?
We
And
talk about it in an industry level a lot, and I don't know the context specifically within which he was speaking, but I share a similar view. I think, businesses, the entire capitalist system,
Mhm.
businesses need the latitude to operate in an unregulated state, except to the extent that they are unwilling to protect the consumer interest, right? I mean, let's just in general terms, right? Obviously that there are certain industries where having consistent regulatory standards makes sense, like payment card industry. It's a good one. I think they do a pretty good job there. But do we want to regulate for every business across the US what the standards are for security? I mean, I would be hugely averse to that from that is government overreach in my opinion. We
Sure,
would not want to
right.
see that.
Right.
And I think his sentiment is right, right? Like in theory, capitalist function should drive the right activities. Sometimes it's more reactive than proactive, which is likely the case here. But eventually it will correct for itself because those that take on an increased level of risk where there is no reward for that other than short-term gains, they'll end up being out of business. And
Right.
those that make the right investments at the right time and balance the need for investing in security and ensuring that it protects their business from a risk management standpoint, they will win in the long run. Those that overinvest will lose too because they can't be profitable.
Right, 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 right. So what's kind of your outlook? Is enough being done by small, medium businesses to keep that type of regulation at bay a little bit, or do you think we're just kind of heading towards, businesses just aren't getting the message quick enough, and we're going to end up there anyway? What's your kind of outlook?
Yeah, it's just as you would think. I think the larger, more sophisticated organizations are going to be at least the most security conscious. I'm not going to characterize them all as being secure or anything like that. And the farther you go down the food chain, the less, the less secure or security aware they're likely to be, right?
Yeah,
I do worry. You brought up actually the example that I use all the time, which was healthcare earlier, and I do worry about some of these because I think there are significant. There are. I'm not even going to pick on healthcare here. There are significant risks to the consumer at those smaller organizations, and and these are oftentimes organizations that are never likely to reach scale. That's just not how they operate. They're still small businesses, right? And they will survive and thrive, but they will do so as small businesses. I worry that there's not enough being done there. Um, do I feel like it requires additional regulation? I mean that would be on a case by industry or data type by data type approach, and I hope we don't get there.
yeah,
That's my feeling about it. But consistency, we got to remember that one thing about regulation is it creates consistency, and in the market, whether you're B2B or B2C, there is increasing awareness at the consumer level of trust. Of I am giving you access to things that are private to me or that I need to be secured and that awareness ultimately I think will also drive behavior at small businesses because they're consumers but they are also offering these products and services, and over time the more we see that I think I'm even as a being in this space, I'm much more aware today than I was 15, 20 years ago in terms of like where I put my data, how I store my data, who I do business with even. These things cross my mind in a way that they didn't in the past. And, obviously I'm one example, but I tend to think that's a general sentiment across the consumer landscape as well.
sure. Since I know we both have a little bit of experience flying planes, let me give this example to you, and I use this the last gentleman I talked to about cybersecurity. I'm a very low hour pilot. I get into it. I'm kind of learning, how to fly the plane, the role of the FAA. And, I get my license and I'm like, cool, I want to fly that plane, that Cirrus. I want to fly that one. I got my hours. I meet all the criteria and the far aim. Let's go. So I'm like, all right, cool. I want to fly it. Like, oh, the FAA doesn't really determine who gets to fly that plane. The insurance company determines how to fly that plane.
Yeah. Yeah.
FAA is all the regulations, but the insurance company ultimately makes the decision on whether you get to fly that plane or not and how much it's going to cost. So when I think back, whenever that first insurance company said, yeah, we'll insure a plane or we'll insure a pilot, I wonder if that's analogous to the journey that insurance companies have to be on with cybersecurity, where it's like, we don't really understand the risk. It looks scary. We don't know. But eventually they take the pole position to say, we decide what happens. Do you, how are insurance companies coming along in this journey? Are they caught up? Are they read in? Are they making good sound decisions? Have they started getting that place where they start deciding how small businesses control their data and their access? What's to follow that analogy? How's that evolving in your vantage point?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great observation. You and I touched on this a little bit, but before the call as well. I think that um, they're in the business of risk transfer, right? So essentially, you're paying them to take on some level of risk above and beyond a deductible or some structure there, and so they're cognizant of that, right? So that's what they're thinking about now. This goes back to is security event driven, adoption of security event driven versus is it compliance driven? And event driven tends to tie into what happens with carriers, right? Because an event happens, somebody gets sued, and then they go, "Oh my gosh, this is big exposure. This is a game changer," and we have to implement some type of requirements that the actuaries can measure and underwrite to, right? And that's how we see it force. I think that is absolutely happening today.
Mm,
One of the major area challenges we have is that there is no good single aggregator of risk. So
mm,
as you and I have talked about before, I think we've seen some startups, or we're seeing startups out there where they're doing the cyber assessment, and also selling the insurance. I am aware of several platforms that are focused on aggregating data in a way that the actuaries can, issue questionnaires or do high level assessments of organizations to affect the premium or make underwriting decisions. So it's coming, but I think the lack of consolidated industry data is a big roadblock there. And it seems like, from a business level, we're finding ways to solve for that. But I think there's some maturity that has to occur in the market first, but absolutely that's going to be a trend.
yeah.
Um, there are other areas where, again, do the carriers care? Maybe in healthcare, right? Like, okay, you said, I think, so what? They stole my x-rays. Well,
Mm.
until somebody gets sued for that,
Right.
nobody really cares, right? Like, I don't care if
Right.
they have my x-ray, but now I want to make a stink of it, and you violated HIPAA, and I think I can get some money from you or your
Sure.
carrier. Once those events start to happen, that's where we really see, okay, we can place a dollar value associated with a risk profile in terms of what we think the exposure is going to be for a carrier.
I got you. Okay, this is very enlightening, Dan. What w- w- I love and I hate, stories from people suffering from an attack or a breach. But where do you play? Where does your business play when that attack happens? You did the assessment. Your partner or their internal IT kind of remediated where they could remediate. When do you get called to say, "Oh shit, Dan, we got a problem"? Are you on the call tree from a business that you've done assessment for to come back and say, "Hey, we just got something happen"? Or is that part of how people communicate with you guys or what people communicate to
Yes,
you?
sometime. I mean, I'd like to say, Josh, that all the assessments we do, we don't have those issues, right? But
Hell yeah, I would think not. I would definitely think not.
what's the saying? I think the practitioners use a lot. Like if you haven't been if you think you haven't been breached, you just don't know it yet, or something along those
Right,
lines, right?
right, right.
So the reality is, I mean, MSPs know as well as anybody, especially if you're managing network security firewalls. I mean, these things are getting hit all the time.
Yeah.
So what we're trying to do is, not we, but the objective from a security standpoint is to minimize the exposure, right? Likelihood and magnitude. Okay, let's minimize the chance for them to get in, and if they do get in, minimize the damage they can do, right? So the reality is, we as an assessor, we're trying to get to an acceptable level of risk, knowing that there are going to be clients that something big happens. When we have hundreds of clients, so when it happens, I mean, it's going to happen, right? And there is always this weighing of how much work do you do and beating up a network as an independent assessor, and what is the value of additional assurance you gain by doing so? Because you can never have absolute assurance, and you can't guarantee what's going to happen tomorrow. I can only look at what it looks like today and what it looked like yesterday.
Mhm,
So we're on the call tree. It varies depending on the organization,
mhm.
but MSPs, this is a big role, right?
Yeah,
Like MSPs they should be first on the call tree. I mean, unless somebody has an internal function that's handling these things, obviously. But
right.
in terms of those interested in this discussion here, that's who we want them to call. Like, look, you guys are there day to day. You know how to take action.
Yeah.
You know what needs to happen to stop the problem. You got to stop the bleeding first, right? And then we've got to lock everything down and figure out what happened, what's the exposure, how do we mitigate what's in process, and then how do we undo things and play damage control.
Yeah.
So we will get the call, but what we really want to see is get your MSP in there. Like that, this is what you pay them for. It's a big role in what they play at a client today, at least from our standpoint. Obviously, we're biased.
Mhm.
But that's really the way we think about it. We're going to hear about it, and then we have to go back and look and say, okay, did we do enough here? Was it within the scope of things that we were looking at? Right? Do we need to reach out or be actively working with the MSP to ensure that everybody has all of the relevant information and that these things are being appropriately addressed?
Right. Right. So I'm just going to kind of put this together in my head a little bit. We've got companies like yours who assess. We've got insurance companies that insure. We got MSPs who, remediate and really posture up the defenses. Then we've got when the event happens, we got the response teams, and then we've got the MSPs to help as well. Where, did I miss anything in that kind of landscape? Anything
I think
obvious?
that there is a segment that is not clearly visible to some today,
Mhm.
but it might take me a couple minutes to describe it. Is now the appropriate time, or
Yeah,
you want
yeah,
to
go
ask
for it. Yeah.
first? So one of the things, when I hear MSP and when we think MSP, we're thinking about like, hey, nodes, right? Seats, managing the network. But
Mhm.
when we think about the office of the CISO, right? The CISO versus the office of the CIO or the CTO, right? How do we draw that line? And that's a rhetorical question, but the way we view that is that the office of the CISO is not hands-on keyboards. You have to leave that to the MSP or the IT organization, right? So what I see versioning is a huge opportunity for MSPs in the community. I mean, you hear about it called vCISO,
Yeah.
right? But how do we characterize that? And the way that I put it is, how do you manage security in terms of how you design your network, how you plan your network, monitor your network, not how do you assess it as independent compliance and not hands-on doing it, but who is there to ensure that you are designing it, it is implemented appropriately, and it's being monitored, and we are staying abreast with all of the things that are happening in the security world. There's gazillions every day right now. Making appropriate adjustments at the client and in terms of what they're doing, what their strategy is, ROI, and that's this office of the CISO. And traditional MSPs typically don't fill that role from what we've seen. And we do this on a limited basis, but it's not our core competence. We can't do it at the clients that we audit, but it is filling that role. It's not hands-on keyboard. You draw the line, but you are there to support the IT organization. You're there to help plan if we're rolling out a system or piece of software or a network change. Are we doing it in a secure manner? That is their role. They are accountable for that, right? So everything you described in that landscape, I would say is absolutely accurate. But if you think about where that accountability rolls up, it is the office of the CISO. And I
Okay.
think that downstream, this is a huge opportunity for MSPs. We're seeing it today. It's underserved. And, if we think about growth, that's where I think we'll see a lot of growth.
Well, that's exactly where I was kind of going with painting that picture. Is I was going to ask you where's the opportunity for either an MSP looking to transition, an MSP looking to add on, or just somebody saying, I'm going to start a business and it's going to be around X in the cyber world. It sounds like that office of the CISO is a pretty interesting place to be.
I would agree with that. And again, just drawing the line of, hey, we don't put hands on keyboards. We are there
Right.
for policy, oversight, planning, management, right? And realistically, if you have a small team and you're able to build that as an MSP, you can have one quote unquote CISO and a couple of analyst level people that can do risk assessments, support policy review and development, and the margins are great on that business.
Yeah.
And especially if you structure it on an MRR basis. I mean, I think there's a really real good opportunity. And it's interesting to me because, I look at it from the standpoint of, as the independent assessor, we create a lot of value for MSPs. So I would say, hey, if you're an MSP and your customer has a security assessment need, we love it when MSP brings us in because the value we create is that, hey, we appreciate you bringing us in. You're going to be the beneficiary of all this shit that we find.
Right, right,
We're
absolutely.
not here to beat up MSPs. We're here to help create a more secure world and help the customer or the client overcome or achieve business objectives. And
Yeah,
you do that through collaboration and partnership, not beating up on the people that are boots on the ground doing the work. So,
yeah,
it's a great way to work together with an independent auditor like ourselves, and reason to bring them in, refer somebody that you know is going to have the right collaborative attitude, and it creates opportunity both from a traditional MSP standpoint, and it shines light with customers or clients that, hey, we really need somebody overseeing this function that's accountable for it.
right.
Because I think that is going to be driven down market, down market, down market to very small businesses, at least on a fractional basis.
Makes sense. I'm reminded of a new client that we just brought on, and talked to the owner, talked to one of the right hand people, and they're like, "Yeah, this is awesome. We love what you guys are doing. We'd love to think about working with you." They bring in the third right hand guy, and if he ever watches this, he'll appreciate it. He came out, guns blazing. It wasn't his idea, so he's going to ask me all these tough questions, and he was a cool guy and really thoughtful, but he was just coming at me so hard. And then, later that night, he actually called me and said, "Hey, can we chat?" I was like, "Oh, hell yeah, dude." So we talk, and I'm like, "Great, I'm gonna get, more beat up." But he's like, we have a conversation, and he said, part of my, kind of maybe bad attitude is I feel like I should know and be able to do what my team is looking to have you guys come in and do. And he was really vulnerable. And I was just like stoked that he said it. Like I just feel like I should know this shit and I don't. And I'm maybe a little embarrassed that we're having to go outside to get help. Can you
That's
relate to
awesome.
that? Can you relate to
Yeah,
that with any of your
absolutely.
clients or an MSP kind of maybe feeling that way?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think you see that a lot, and especially when you have new people come to an organization that you've been working with for some time. I mean, the way I like to describe it, I don't know if it's appropriate, but big swinging dicks.
Yeah.
Like, they come in and, they want to make their mark, bring in their vendors, their people,
Yeah.
and oftentimes it's not best for the organization. And
Right.
we don't. And the irony, Josh, is that I see a lot of this with CISOs, and there are a
Mm,
lot of very large ego CISOs out there, and that's that's can be dangerous. I mean, you're putting your own priorities ahead of the organization sometimes.
yeah.
And again, my observation here, and this is how we run our own business. Like, hey, let me learn, let me understand, why are we doing this, what works, what doesn't, and obviously, I'm brought in here for a reason, whether I'm brought in as a consultant or as their independent assessor. But I need to be very clear on the objectives, but also how do we best accomplish this from a business standpoint? And
Right.
that starts by listening and learning and, taking good notes and then collaborating to find solutions. And we don't have to know everything. We are here to help facilitate change or facilitate a specific outcome, and usually keeping consistency to the extent you can, and controlling change is the way to do that, and being very, very strategic in how you approach those kind of decisions and conversations for that matter.
Yeah, hell yeah. Okay. Yeah, I kind of fear there might be some similarities in just that person who felt like they should know or they don't want to kind of bring you in because they're afraid that maybe they'll look bad or somehow like that. But it sounds like you guys handle that very well.
Hey, it happens all the time, Josh. I mean,
Yeah.
we have probably more turnover with clients when you get a new person in the organization than for
Yeah.
any other reason. They just, they're either threatened, or they need to bring in somebody that they feel they have in their back pocket, or
Mhm.
their friends, buddies,
Yeah.
those kind of
Nothing
things.
new here. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
So, okay. So I've got two more questions for you.
sure,
And thank you, Dan, by the way. So now
of
you're going
course.
to kind of go into career counselor mode for me. All right. I got a son. He's, 20, 21 years old, goes to a good school out in California. His minor is comedy theater. Never really gave a shit about IT. Just, couldn't tell you much about IT. But he gets into this major cybersecurity. And I'm like, what are you doing, kid? You're not an IT guy. Like you don't. This is not your world. And I think of all my MSPs who are highly technical folks talking about security. And I'm like, well, my boy doesn't know this stuff. But as he's getting into it, he's about to graduate. He's, in this cybersecurity major, it's like, oh shit, you're learning real awesome stuff. You'll still never have had the hands-on building an exchange server, doing all the things. He now has an internship with a company that just does policies, like just tons of policies, really great, cool looking company. And he'll probably get a job there. Help me reconcile how a kid who never had any IT training is learning in a major out of college, all this policy stuff and ethical hacking and all these things. How do they create how are they valuable to a firm that's doing cybersecurity policy, implementation and writing? Can you help me with that?
Absolutely. And, Josh, I thought we might actually get through the whole podcast without talking about AI, but I think this is going to
Okay.
dovetail into
All right. There you go. There you go.
No, I actually, th- he's probably the profile of who we would hire out of college. I'll start
Really?
by saying that. Absolutely. And the reason being is that the world that we live in, obviously hands-on is critically important to the ability for the world to go round, right?
Yeah.
But what's really important for us are different characteristics, and it's
Mm,
the ability and aptitude to learn. It's what I like to call horsepower. Can you do this? The willingness to and desire to succeed.
mhm,
There are a lot of intangibles, first of all.
mm,
Secondly, and I mean, this is fundamental, of course, but the ability to listen and to problem solve.
mm,
And at a very tactical level, I'll say it this way: if I'm putting myself in his shoes and I'm rewinding 25 or 30 years, and they send me out to a client and I'm doing policy work, I'm not there to be an expert. I'm there to listen, and I'm going to talk
mhm,
to the sysadmin and say, "Listen, I am no expert."
mhm,
But what I'm really good at is listening and helping to understand what's working and what isn't, and how you do things in a way that I can document that and facilitate training and ensure at the organizational level others can understand that as well.
mhm.
And I can even use this to help you make changes to things, right?
Right.
So tell me what I don't know. Help me understand this. What keeps you up at night?
Mm,
And again, I'm putting a little bit of an auditor spin on this, but the
sure.
point is that being an expert can be dangerous as well. And being a listener and a problem solver, and then really understanding how this works at a business level, that's what
Mhm.
we're doing. And
Yes.
and that's what makes us good advisors too. And I think your son is in a great position if that's what he's doing. Um,
Yeah. Okay.
I'll leave it at that.
Well,
Before
okay.
I talk about the AI piece, because I think that's important for up and coming grads too.
Okay, well let's kind of find our way there because I look at this and I'm, again, I talk about no expert. I am no expert. I hear the word policies and I think, okay, well, we got a time entry policy. We enter our time this way. So then do we have a policy that says, hey, when you sign up for that new app, make sure to check the MFA button. Don't just log in with the password. Is that an example of a really basic policy? Is that the
Could
kind of
be.
policies we need?
I mean, there's probably I don't know the context in which he's working, but I think of policy development, like, what's your change management policy?
Okay.
Disaster recovery,
Okay.
things like that. Those are
Okay.
policy procedure level things. I mean, there are a lot of other variations of policies, as we know in the IT world,
Yeah.
security policies at the application levels, network level, things like that. But
So in my mind, then I just have to engineer a really awesome prompt for ChatGPT. Say, make me all the policies to be HIPAA compliant or SOC do whatever. Like that's done in an hour and a half. No.
hence the lead in, right? Like,
Yes. Yes.
one of the things I think is important for grads to understand that are coming out today is how to position in the world of the future, which, we know AI is going to affect everything that everybody does. But there are clearly areas that it's going to have sweeping changes, like,
Mm,
application development. That is likely an area that's going to really, really hurt. And you're going to see a lot of people, sort of going in different directions, right? But fortunately, most of us in the rest of the world, there's are not going to experience it quite the same way. And understanding what industry or segments are likely to be hardest hit is really important. And then having some insight into industry dynamics. And just
mm,
as a couple of examples here, for us, we're at the end of the day, we're a tech-enabled services firm, but we're really a professional services firm. We create value through white glove service, and that's how we approach things. We think about ROI. We try to align with what we do with business strategy. And as an operator, if I suddenly stopped hiring people out of college or junior level people to do the lowest order tasks, I am also cutting off my pipeline for developing the people of tomorrow that can have the same discussion you and I are having today, right?
Right.
So it's an impossibility from that standpoint. Secondarily, as we think about where the world goes, you want to align yourself with being able to leverage AI and be a controller of the technology rather than to be displaced, right? And when I hear things like policy, it's concerning because, okay, well, what does that mean? Is he writing the policies, or are they putting in front of him in front of platforms and teaching him how to leverage technology in a way that he's effectively doing with the support of AI what 10 people were doing before, and what the person of the future is doing in that role.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's interesting. That's really interesting. Yeah, he's mentioned some of the tools they play with, and he's mentioned, what the workflow looks going down to the lowest intern like himself, and it's fascinating to me because I understand a few buzzwords, but I'm like, I'm glad there's a home for it, and I'm glad there's a place for you in it because he is enjoying it. Um, Dan, let me ask you this. Now we're gonna go totally off topic here.
Sure.
I don't want to embarrass you. You've had amazing success. You've grown to just an amazing level. You got a sales team. How
Yes.
did we get the growth? And because I know a lot of our MSPs that listen, they struggle to break through a couple of different barriers, and having a sales team and building it and developing it and failing at it and keeping on going. That's where we get choked up. How have you tackled this sales component over the
Are,
years?
are you teeing yourself up here, Josh?
I
Because
am not.
I'm going to have to go back to when you and I met. I don't know, must have been like 15 years ago,
Just
ages
about.
ago.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I give you a lot of credit in this, Josh.
Well, I appreciate it.
I'll give myself the credit in knowing that our industry was changing and we needed to separate the service delivery and sales team, which was not conventional
Okay.
in our industry segment.
Right.
But you really helped us with that. And the first thing, again, things you probably have said a million times in this podcast, was understanding metrics.
Mm,
And then understanding, as we break down that sales component of spend, what that organization needs to look like to scale, right?
right.
And knowing that, I mean, go-to-market strategies, how to hire a good sales manager. That was another good takeaway, which
Mm,
we've hit or missed on over the years, but
sure.
that was something that you helped us realize. We the mistakes, right, that we all know. You put your best sales guy in the sales manager position. Horrible,
Right.
right? That's the situation we were in when you and I met,
Yeah.
and who that particular person has gone back to being a seller for us, and is still here 15 years later and wildly
Wow.
successful. Yep.
I love that guy, by the way. I don't remember his name, but I remember liking him a lot. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Good. Great guy. Great guy. But yeah, I mean, look, it all starts with sales, and the delivery team service delivery will always tell you, without us, there's nothing to sell. Well, if we aren't selling it, then there's nothing to deliver either. It goes both
That's
ways,
right.
right?
That's right.
But really, really iterate. I mean, for us, it's been iterations of development. Every
Yeah.
stage of growth, you have to reinvent how you do it, right? And that's just the truth.
Yeah.
Early on, we were heavily reliant on Google Ads when the market wasn't saturated.
Right.
And then we've had a product-centric strategy at some point, go to market. And then we've pivoted to cross-functional teams going to market with delivery and sales partnering up,
Mm,
strategies that are more what I would call real strategies, where combining you're combining tactics like email, calls, events, webinars in a collective process that gives you some sort of outcome. So I'm kind of all over the board, Josh. I don't know if
yeah.
there's something specific you
No,
want
no,
to. We're in the process
that
of doing it again right now.
of course, of course. So what do we have a sales department today? Maybe if you can share,
Yes.
we got 5 salespeople, we got one, we got 100. What's that kind of look like if you can share?
Our sales function is probably 17 or 18 people,
Okay.
I would think in total. Now, go to market, I think we've got maybe 13 or so. Well, we might have more than 17 or 18, but so we have, just to give you some idea of structure, this is in transition right now. We have an account manager, a singular account man, and our structure is a little bit different, but
Sure.
Account management sort of overlays with delivery because they have such a close relationship with the client. You know, it's a partner relationship really. So there's a process and infrastructure for account management that the effectively director of that function oversees and then creates accountability and flows into sales process with, right? So that's how we focus on retention and net retention, which for any MSP should know, that's how you drive value in the business, right? Margins is what you're multiplying, and how you get to a multiplier is a combination of growth and how retentive your business is typically.
Right.
So the go-to-market team is a combination of senior people. These are high earning people and
Uh-huh.
junior people. That's how we can focus. That's how we position more in the mid-market and enterprise. I think that, you know, if you have a good sales manager and or one or two good senior level sellers and a handful of juniors, you can probably canvas that one or that, sub 50 user market or sub 100 users. But we sort of have a mix here, go to market teams where you've got a junior and a senior, or a senior and a couple juniors. And then again, we use a cross functional approach. We want to draw knowledge capital from the business to create the go to market strategies. We have a marketing director. We outsource a bunch of the marketing task level stuff just because we can't justify the expense full time in those functions. And then we have a demand gen person full time that rolls into marketing as well.
How does that role function, that demand gen?
That is a great question, Josh. I don't
Fair enough.
It's relatively new to us, but
Yeah,
I think it is much more there's so many tools out there now. Like I
yeah.
hear these words and they're words to me, to be very clear.
Mhm.
Like Clay. I mean, we've got Zoom Info,
Right,
Apollo,
right.
there's Six Sense. There are these tools that now can create the tech stack itself creates a lot more value than it used to.
Yes.
And you can be much more targeted in how you go to market and who you're targeting. And so I believe that demand gen function, the way we think about it, is very focused on ensuring that tech stack is supporting the sales team so that we are creating opportunity for us, creating demand, right? And that's
Right.
not just going out and pounding the pavement, but we're really targeted. We know when there is a potential buyer engaging with the marketplace, and we are thinking about both how do we get access to that buyer, and then what strategies do we employ to cast a broad net and catch a few of those fish.
Yeah, hell yeah. Okay. All right, okay, so I'll really start winding us down here. I don't want any dollar numbers, nothing like that. You are a metrics guy. What percentage of your revenue do you put towards sales and marketing? What do you typically try to budget into?
I'm going to give you. So I'm going to repeat back to you what you told me 15 years ago or more, and
Okay.
it was 10%, right?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I won't give away all the metrics you gave me, but let's call it 10%. We look
Okay.
at that a little bit differently now, right?
Yeah.
Like because the your margin run rate, your gross margin and your net margin, as
Uh,
well as your cost of sales, really should be relevant to growth. Right?
yes.
So if you're growing at an industry average rate, you want to spend an industry average percentage of revenue on sales and
Right.
marketing, right? If you are trying to increase growth or there's a lot of white space in whatever your niche area is, then you can tick that percentage up, because what you're really trying to do is you're trying to fuel growth with
Right.
um sales spend because the market's there. But otherwise, you're probably overspending on it for what you can turn around into delivery organization. So
Yeah.
right now we run in the 14 to 18%,
Yep.
but we're trying to drive, minimum 20 to 30% growth. But that's also at scale. We're
Right.
we're in, the several tens of millions. And it does get harder. And at
Yeah.
the same time, we're trying to get it to a margin goal. So we can operate around rule of 50 to 60.
Mhm.
Um, but if we stay in that 14 to 18% sales spend right
You
now.
hold on. You can live in 40 to 60 margin.
No, rule of 50. So
Oh. Oh.
call it EBITDA plus growth percentage. So,
I got
we
you.
want to be 20 to 30% growth. We want to be 25 to 35% EBITDA. And
Okay.
the net. And another, again, I spent a lot of time in equity markets and so forth. And for those MSPs that are thinking about the next step or outside investment or an exit, you got to balance profitability and growth. The days of cheap free money are gone. We're never going to see rates is that the way they were again. And investors out there, venture, private equity, strategics, that balance is really critical. So, you want to chomp at rule of 40 or target that,
Yeah.
keep balance in there. If it's, again, a lot of traditional MSPs probably aren't going to see that unless they're targeting those versioning areas like the vCISO stuff. But you
Right.
want to live at the upper end, make sure to balance. Try to get your 10 to 20% net income, really try to at a minimum, and then try to drive 10 to 20% growth, right? And if you want to be a growth company, you got to push those metrics up.
That's I love that you mentioned that ratio. I don't have it handy, but we kind of live in this 37. Like that's the Bering McKinley. It's our 37. We got to either hit 20% growth and 17% net or some combination, but that number better be fucking 37 or higher every year, or else we know we're doing something wrong.
That's
So
right. That's right.
yeah,
And I'll tell you this, there's been some studies, Josh, that basically once you get over 20% growth in like
yeah,
IT services,
yeah.
it doesn't really affect your multiple.
Is that
It's
right?
really starts to fall off, increase in multiple. So for those
Ah,
listeners that are thinking about this stuff, I mean, living in that 20% range is if you start sacrificing EBITDA for growth at that point, I mean, again, I would think hard about driving more EBITDA if you can,
oh, how
and
interesting.
moderating growth in that area.
Yeah, hell yeah. I never thought about there being kind of a point of diminishing return
Yep.
on that. So that's cool. Don't sacrifice too much net profit just to get another 5 points of growth if you're already above the 20%. Okay.
Yep.
Well,
Yep.
shit, Dan. Well, we'll leave that as words of wisdom from you. I appreciate that. Dan, it's such a pleasure to have you on the pod. Love having you here. Where can people find you out in the world?
Sure. 360advanced.com. Best place to find us. They can find me on LinkedIn, Dan Collins. You'll see me 360 Advanced.
Hell
Really
yeah, man.
appreciate you having me on, Josh.
Yeah.
You've been a great help to us over the years. Always enjoy our discussions, and great to catch up and to have a chance to talk with you today.
Hell yeah, man. Always appreciate it. Everyone else, thanks for joining us today. Make sure to like, share, subscribe if we earned it. It means a big deal to us. And catch y'all next time. Bye.